Hello. Please do let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. Somebody just give me a quick hello if it's all working. Hopefully. Everything working okay? Hear me and see me? Yeah, fabulous. So hello, welcome to HMSALiveOT. For those of you who haven't joined us before, my name is Jo Southall. I am an independent occupational therapist and I also live with hypermobility, EDs, POTS and all sorts of other stuff. So I'm here tonight to answer any and all questions on living with hypermobility disorders of any kind, on symptom management, on adaptations, mobility aids, creative solutions to things. Basically any kind of issue you're having that you think I might be able to help with, stick it in the comments and I will see what I can do for advice. There may be some things I can't answer, so in that case I'll normally just recommend who you do speak to in the hopes that they can answer. So yeah, I've got a couple of questions from before that were like pre-asked. So I'm going to make a start with those, but do stick your questions in the comments and I will work my way through those as soon as I can. So, questions from before. Okay, so why do I curl my wrists and hands over when I sleep? Would I have less pain if I wore splints at night? Thank you. Okay, so jokingly I've heard this called church mouse pose before. So you find that you kind of curl yourself up like this and it's all nice and snuggly until the next morning when you try and use your arms for something and realise you've kind of got claws instead of hands and you can't really function. It's a problem, obviously. So one of the things you can look at are night resting splints. So these are basically splints that are designed to be worn when you sleep. They are much more padded and with much less kind of Velcro and exposed metal work than standard splints. So they are much safer in terms of the risk of developing pressure issues, or you're unlikely to find they rub anywhere, anything like that. They tend to be quite bulky. They tend to be quite restrictive, so it kind of looks like a giant like mitten that just sort of cups the inside of your hand and comes down to about mid forearm. These can be really, really good. The evidence base for them is a little bit sketchy. Some people find them useless, other people find that they completely change the way everything works and they're fantastic. The only way to know really is to try. Unfortunately, they can be quite expensive, so I generally recommend a referral to NHS orthotics or hand therapy in order to have them properly fitted and provided, and try them that way. The only downside if you've got bilateral problems is that once you've got one on, it's very difficult to use your other hand to put the second one on. So you may find you have to get quite good at doing Velcro with your teeth in order to wear them with both hands, and that a little bit of an escape solution needs to be practiced if you're planning on a late night trip to the loo or you need to like get out of them again the next morning. So it's not an ideal solution. You may find if you have had an injury on one hand recently, it's worth splinting that one, or you can alternate. If you think splinting is maybe a bit too restrictive, there are a couple of halfway solutions. The first one is just hugging a teddy bear or a pillow. So anything that kind of supports your hands, anything for you to hold on to that stops you from being in that really tight curled up position. Teddy bears work well, hot water bottles. You can get microwavable teddy bears that are like wheat bag teddy bear hybrids aimed at kids, but there's no reason why grown-ups can't have them too. They generally work quite well, and actually if you've got really kind of naff circulation in winter, keeping your hands warm at night is kind of an added bonus. So yeah, generally kind of sleeping with your hands tucked under the pillows can sometimes work as well. So yeah, hopefully that sort of answers that question. Okay, question number 2. What is the best way to relieve pain in ankles and shin splints, please? Ouch, not fun. So ankle pain can be for a number of reasons, much in the same way that pain of any kind can be for a number of reasons. Often it may be a case that you are a bit hypermobile. So when you're walking, you kind of wobble and twist your ankles and tweak things a little bit. You're perhaps not quite so kind of sturdy as you'd like. So you end up with kind of mini injuries a lot of the time. Often a lot of us have picked up injuries that just haven't quite healed right either. So it can be a kind of a long-term issue in that respect. Pain from that is pretty common. Pain from walking too far is also pretty common. Pain from overdoing it, pain from twisting your ankles. So it may be that step one is working out what's actually causing that pain. Is it generic aches and pains that we all get from time to time? Or is it that actually you're falling over a bit too often? Or your shoes aren't supportive enough? Or is it that a particular activity you're doing repeatedly causes a problem? So it's worth having a little bit of a symptom diary, or even just to think about what you've been doing before the pain's kicked in. Is it that every time you go swimming, 24 hours later, you get horrendous ankle pain? In which case, is it your kicking technique under the water? So sometimes it's worth just having a bit of a think about and see if you can solve the problem that actually ends up producing the pain. If that's not the case, pain management is kind of the same for all places. Heat, ice, massage, compression can be quite useful. Pain medication, obviously, anti-inflammatories can be quite useful as well if you can tolerate them. Speak to your GP about those. It may be that massage balms are a useful thing for you to try. It may be that wearing ankle boots is useful. It might be that you actually need ankle braces because you're constantly falling over a little bit too much and it's just not healing. If you find that you do have particularly wobbly ankles, seeing a physiotherapist is recommended. Podiatry can also be quite useful. If you're not currently under a physiotherapist and want to be, you can, in most areas of the UK, now self-refer. So if you put in your postcode and physiotherapy self-referral, you can sort that out online, and they'll kind of triage you without you needing to go via your GP. Because of COVID at the moment, things are a little bit wonky in most of healthcare. So what you may find is you get an email or a telephone call with some exercises to try or something like that. And you can kind of go from there. And then if that's not working, you phone physio back and they kind of give you a bit more of a consultation. But hopefully we'll find ways to sort of socially distance in-person appointments soon. So fingers crossed. Okay. Shin splints as well. This is less of an OT thing and more of a personal experience thing. I have found some relief with acupuncture for shin splints, so that might be worth considering. But ice and compression are really good ones for that. Okay, next question. Is POTS linked to EDS in any way? In short, yes it is. So POTS, for those of you that haven't come across it, is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It is a form of autonomic dysfunction. Your autonomic system is basically responsible for all of the things your body should do without being told to. So respiration, blood pressure, heart rate, digestion, a couple of hormones like adrenaline, how often you pee, how much you sweat, all that kind of stuff. Quite a lot of people with any kind of hypermobility disorder, for one reason or another, will have a little bit of a wonky autonomic system. You may not have enough wonky to generate a whole new diagnosis of POTS, but it doesn't mean if you don't have a POTS diagnosis that you actually have a functioning autonomic system. So it's quite common to have things like if you stand up too fast you get dizzy, or if you eat a big meal you get really sleepy afterwards. Or trying to think of another example, night sweats are another one, and struggling to regulate your body temperature. All of these things are kind of autonomic issues that all of us have a bit of an issue with. In terms of POTS, the key kind of diagnostic criteria would be an increase in, make sure I get this right, an increase in heart rate of 40 beats or more in the first 10 minutes of going from horizontal to standing up. It's normally diagnosed by a tilt table test, which is thoroughly unenjoyable for anyone who's ever had one. But yeah, basically it's just another way that your autonomic system is a bit wonky. POTS, key kind of symptoms are tachycardia, particularly on postural change. Some people will faint, not everyone does. I'm one of the non-fainting people with POTS. I think around about a third of people with POTS do faint at times. The rest of us just get really high heart rate. Sometimes you get really bad brain fog in combination with that. Being quite heat intolerant is another one that's quite common with POTS. But yeah, so in short, yes, it is linked. No, we don't really know why, but there is a big kind of correlation there. Okay, carrying on. Is that all of my pre-asked questions? Yes, I think it is. Okay, I'm going to dive into the comments and see what we've got. Oh, there's quite a lot already, crikey. Okay, I was diagnosed with HMS when I was 15, very bendy and dislocated frequently. I'm now 25 and notice that my joints are a lot stiffer now. Is this common as you grow up? Okay, yes, in short, it can be for a couple of reasons. The first one is that children tend to be more flexible than adults. They just are. The second one is that if you are very hypermobile and your ligaments are rubbish and your joints dislocate frequently, one of the things that tends to happen as a result of that is muscle stiffness as a response to pain and to injury. So because your ligaments aren't really pulling their weight, they aren't really working the way they should, your body relies on muscle tension to hold everything in place. So a lot of us can end up quite stiff and quite tense as a way to protect ourselves from being really hypermobile. So often that is the case. The difficult bit is that flexibility and hypermobility can be very, very different things. So I used to be a gymnast. I still do a little bit of stretching every once in a while. I used to do quite a lot of yoga, but I don't do it so much now. I am less flexible than I was. My range of motion is smaller. I can't do so many of the yoga poses, but I'm actually no less hypermobile. So I still have instability around my joints. My sacroiliac joints still fall out whenever they like. My feet still wander off. My ankles are naff. My hips are a bit rubbish. My wrists are useless. But I am less flexible. So it's sometimes difficult to work out what's flexibility and what's hypermobility, but just because you are less flexible and you feel stiffer, don't think that automatically translates to, oh good, my joints are going to stop coming out of place, because it kind of doesn't. But generally speaking, seizing up a little bit is just quite a common thing that happens to everyone. It's just a bit more noticeable if you've already got musculoskeletal problems, and you're more aware of your body because you have to be, or you fall over. So yeah, I think that is just the normal way that it goes. I hope that answers your question. But yeah, the other thing that I will just point out is that sometimes if you, for example, dislocate a joint over and over and over and over again, and you have constant injuries, one of the things that can happen there is you build up a bit of scar tissue. So you can end up with restricted motion just through repeat injury. So if you constantly kind of damage your joint, you will lose a range of motion around that. Which is actually why stretching can be quite beneficial for hypermobility, as long as you're improving your flexibility, not improving or exacerbating your hypermobility. So understanding the difference is quite important. Okay, tell me about your pretty rings. Okay, so these are my ring splints, some of them anyway. They basically are aimed at reducing hypermobility while allowing a normal range of motion. These are from Ring Splints by Zomil, which I think my link fairy has already shared. So basically the joints in my fingers are a bit squishy, and I find that when I try to click the buttons on my mouse, or when I try to type, sometimes my finger will hyperextend rather than the keys moving, which is a little inconvenient. So these basically prevent hyperextension, but still allow me to make a fist, still allow me to do kind of fine motor activities, etc. So yeah, basically they just prevent me from constantly injuring myself whilst battling plug sockets and keyboards and all other kinds of things. Okay. Next question. Biggest question here is pain relief. What do other people take? I just got told to take naproxen, but it's not strong enough. I also have to be careful as I drive and work as a nurse, so I can't take ones that make you drowsy. Eating paracetamol and heating the whole body. Okay, so pain management is like a really big area. The area I deal in is things like, actually, have you tried a TENS machine? Have you looked into magnesium to help with spasms? Have we looked into heat, ice, splinting, pacing, joint protection? All of that stuff is in my wheelhouse. Medication is something that I can't really comment on. Your best bet from a medication perspective is to ask for a pain clinic referral. So pain clinic is kind of an overall department where they dump people whose pain doesn't respond to 6 weeks of anti-inflammatories. Often it's a multidisciplinary area, so you'll have a physiotherapist who specialises in pain, you might have an occupational therapist, you might have a psychologist, because being in pain constantly is really not great for your mental health, and you might have like a clinical pharmacologist or a consultant or a doctor attached to that. They're really very good at medication from a pain perspective, so it may be that actually just chucking opiates at you isn't the right job. Naproxen is an anti-inflammatory along the same lines as like Voltarol and ibuprofen, so it may be that a combination of anti-inflammatory and painkillers, or it may be that antidepressants are the way to go. So antidepressants, SSRIs, tricyclic antidepressants and SSNRIs are basically aimed at shifting your brain chemistry around a little bit to treat chronic pain. So it's nothing to do with your mood, it's nothing to do with depression. What we're looking at is switching off pain signals in your brain by altering neurotransmitter levels. So antidepressants can help with chronic pain, they can help with that kind of weird neuropathic symptoms like fizzy feelings or tingly feelings or burning pain. And they can help you get a good night's sleep, which often makes a world of difference. The other thing that may be kind of relevant is like things like steroid injections to persistent injuries, and Pain Clinic can discuss all of those with you. So that is your best bet, particularly if you found that you need to be kind of quite careful because of your job and because of things like that. So my advice would be to speak to your GP about a Pain Clinic referral and see if you can get in that way. Okay. As well as stiffness in joints, they also get quite painful and often crack and pop if I move them quickly or move after being still for long periods of time. Okay, so this is quite an interesting one. So the kind of crunchy, kind of grindy feelings you get with your joints kind of make you feel like human bubble wrap at times. There are a couple of different reasons why joints might crack or crunch or do all kinds of other stuff. The first one is very simple in that if you are hypermobile, often you have quite a big range of motion around your joints. If you have an excessive range of motion, what you may find is that moving your joints in ways they shouldn't creates bubbles in the synovial fluid in your joints. So all of our joints have got a little bit of kind of fluid between them to stop them wearing away, basically. And if you create air bubbles in that, when you crack your knuckles, as an example, it pops the air bubbles. So you basically turn yourself into human bubble wrap. That's the first reason. That's normally quite a high pitch, totally painless, or it might even produce some kind of relief. And generally kind of tends to happen with joints you've been using quite a lot. So hands are a common one because you use your hands all the time. The other kinds of crunching and popping sometimes is ligament and tendon related. So you can have your elbows are quite a common one actually. The tendons in your elbow can slip over to the wrong side of your joint. Hips do it as well. So you get kind of like a snap feeling, or even sometimes like a snap sound, and it's actually just the tendon snapping back to where it should have been all along. The other kind of popping and crunching is my joints have wandered out and now they've gone back where they belong. So you can have a total dislocation, which is where one part of the joint is completely not where it belongs at all, from like the socket. So it would be something like that. Or you can have a subluxation, which is like a partial dislocation. So something isn't quite sitting right, or it went out and straight back in again, or like the alignment is just a bit wrong, or it's sort of out of joint but not all the way. Those are a lot more common, but they can also be quite dramatic. So you can sublux a hip and it will floor you completely. You'll be in a heap on the ground, that's it. Equally, you can be the sort of person who, because they're so hypermobile, can still wander around on a subluxated ankle, as an example. So it's really difficult to tell what you've done there without x-rays, basically, but a lot of us will get quite good at knowing how our body should feel and look, and if it's not quite right, working out how to put that back. So yeah, often one of the things you can do is try to stay active even if you're resting. So rather than having a rest day where you really just need to be completely horizontal, try to get into the habit of at least sitting up, having a little bit of a stretch, a bit of a wiggle, and then laying back down again. I think on the HMSA YouTube channel, Hannah has done a video of her kind of stretching routine during rest breaks, which I will stick up if Link Fairy hasn't got there before me. But these kind of micro breaks are really useful as a pacing tool as well. So take 10 to 30 seconds away from whatever you're doing, close your eyes, have a stretch, check on your posture, see if your arms and legs are attached, all that kind of thing. As people who live in pain and fatigue often do, we get very, very good at ignoring things our bodies are trying to tell us, because you have to ignore some stuff. If every time it hurt you stopped, or if every time something was kind of felt a bit funny you went to the doctor, you wouldn't survive. It would just ruin your life. So we often go too far the other way and start ignoring everything until you reach the point where your body is screaming at you and you physically can't function anymore. With micro breaks, it's sometimes a useful opportunity to just go, okay, I'm just going to do a little bit of an MOT, head to toe. Does anything hurt? Have I had a drink? Do I need new medication? Was I supposed to eat 2 hours ago? When was the last time I had a cup of tea or some fresh air? And just deal with those immediately. Putting them off doesn't do you any favours. The more proactive you are with self-management, the more effective it is. So the example I most often give is with headaches. If you have a bit of a headache, often a drink and 5 minutes of fresh air is enough to get you back again. You're okay, you're good to carry on. If you ignore a headache for 4 hours, you're then in paracetamol and darkened room territory. So it's much more effective to have a break sooner, but for less time, than it is to keep pushing yourself for longer and then to actually have like a really long recovery period afterwards. So fidgeting is your friend, and keeping mobile is a good thing. Even if it kind of seems like it's exhausting, it's actually better for you. Okay, the ring splints one I've already covered. Where these are from, there are so many places. Etsy is actually a surprisingly good place to shop for ring splints. Quite a lot of companies on there are now run by hand therapists or have like affiliated medical professionals as part of their team. So they can make kind of splints for any and all scenario. So I would check that out. Hand therapy at your local hospital should be good as well. Now getting pain in my fingers, elbows and wrists. Is this common? In short, pain everywhere is common. But that doesn't mean you should assume that any new pain is just because of hypermobility. Any and all new symptoms should be investigated or run past your GP, or at least mentioned in passing. It's dangerous territory where you start assuming everything your body does is because of your diagnosis. You can end up missing symptoms that are actually something else and could be dealt with. Even if it is just because you're hypermobile, it doesn't mean that physiotherapy won't be effective, and it doesn't mean that anti-inflammatories won't be effective, or taping, or massage, or any of the other strategies we can use. So if you're having new symptoms, run it past your GP. If it's joint related, then a physiotherapy referral is a smart thing to do. But in short, pain is a pretty common symptom, so hopefully that kind of answers your question. Okay. A lot of them they've got kind of like metalwork running through them, you can bend them a bit to fit better. So if you're not comfortable doing it, you know, find a hand therapist or an OT or a physio or something, but trying to bend them so they fit you really, really, really well. It can take a bit of practice to get them right as well. Correct fit is really important for something you're going to be wearing for a long time. So sometimes a little bit of kind of tinkering with the fit is what you need to get them working well. Okie dokie. Next one. Any advice for helping to manage neck pain that is then making TMJ pain worse? And any neck support that may help with pain in the neck and feeling weak and hard to hold up. Unable to see my orthotics team until the end of October. First question is, have you seen a physiotherapist about that one? The neck is an area where it's very, very easy to lose muscle tone and very, very difficult to get that muscle tone back. Your body is supposed to be holding your head up all of the time. If it starts having a problem with that and then you start splinting it a lot, you can kind of lose the ability to hold your own head up quite quickly. That's not to say splinting is the wrong approach. If your head kind of not being held up is causing you problems, you need an alternate solution to your own neck. But I wouldn't recommend just buying neck braces or supports. Generally, they need to be prescribed simply because the fit is so important, and the advice that comes along with that needs to be kind of bespoke to your individual case. A kind of short-term solution you can do is U-shaped travel pillows, so just having something behind your neck and around the sides, and just taking regular breaks where you're laying down or reclining. I deliberately bought an office chair that reclines and one that I could have my feet up on, because I know I do need to be horizontal a bit more than your average healthcare professional does. So yeah, finding kind of comfortable positions and just getting in them regularly, even if it's for short breaks, can be really, really effective. And maintaining range of motion. So try not to seize up, try to kind of keep relaxed, keep your shoulders dropped down into a neutral position and just stay mobile, but sensibly. Don't go like throwing your head around, that kind of thing. Just gentle, smooth movements. TENS machine might be a good one to try. Often the kind of referred pain, you get referred pain because you're tensing up, is the most kind of common one. So finding a way to manage the pain means that you can relax better, which means you don't get that kind of referred tension carrying on. So TENS on kind of upper back and the back of your shoulders might be a really, really good thing to try. TENS is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation, I think. Is that right? I always feel like I've got that wrong. Anyway, it's basically electrical pain relief. So you get little sticky electrodes that make tingly feelings. And if your body's dealing with tingly feelings, it can't also deal with pain. There's only so much sensory kind of output your body can deal with at once. So tingly is generally an improvement over ouchy. So that's basically how it works. TMJ, if instability is an issue, I sometimes tape my jaw. So just a little bit of kinesiology tape or something similar. Just cut some off here. So that's much too wide. You only want like a half size piece. So that kind of size, and then with a split up the middle, like so. Hopefully that's clear. I normally round the corners off, but I'm not going to do that now because I'm not actually going to apply this. I normally, personally, start as high up almost in my hairline as I can get. You may need to shave your sideburns if that's an issue. And then it's just one piece straight down and then round the corner underneath my jaw, and then one piece kind of along my jawline here, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to do it now, if that's okay. Can't leave skin for no reason. But yeah, hopefully that kind of makes sense. There are quite a lot of videos and tips online for that. I sometimes find post-jaw dislocation, a little bit of tape just improves my kind of awareness of where my jaw is supposed to be, and it makes it easier for me to hold it in a neutral position and to eat without kind of like wandering off, that kind of thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay. Scrolling down. Lots of chat in the comments, which is excellent. Why do rheumatologists seem so reluctant to diagnose EDS? It's really frustrating. I think often it depends on the rheumatologist. So rheumatology is a really kind of wide, like, breadth of condition. There's quite a lot rheumatologists deal with. And within that, hypermobility disorders, until relatively recently, were kind of neglected a little bit. So I think often it's a case that unless you're seeing an EDS specialist or a hypermobility specialist, they genuinely don't tend to know all that much. I also think with the 2015 changes in diagnostic criteria, there's a bit of confusion around things still. But equally, diagnosis shouldn't matter as much as it seems to. Is that what I wanted to say? Yeah, diagnosis shouldn't matter in terms of treatment. Treatment should be provided based on clinical need, based on symptoms, based on, you know, what you actually need to manage. And that can be the same or it can be different depending on so many different things. It doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who has EDS needs hydrotherapy, and nobody with HSD does. There are people with hypermobility spectrum disorders who are quite severely disabled and they have really severe symptoms, and there are people with EDS who get off pretty lightly but just have a wide range of kind of minor symptoms. So there's often a little bit of a perception that diagnosis indicates severity, and it really doesn't. And symptom management shouldn't be dependent on diagnosis. So as frustrating as it is trying to get to a doctor who will diagnose you with whatever it is that you have, in the meantime, don't feel like you aren't entitled to treatment, and you shouldn't be given access to treatment, because you should. You should be able to get everything you need, regardless of diagnosis or lack thereof. It's just that diagnosis makes it a little bit easier, and it's useful to know what you have in a personal capacity. So I feel like that was a bit rambly, but hopefully the message is there that it is frustrating, but it may be like a lack of knowledge on their part, and it shouldn't kind of have an impact on you accessing treatment. So don't let people kind of write you off because you don't have a diagnosis, if that's kind of makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to drink. Okay. How do you get a referral to the correct area about MCAS symptoms? Would it be through rheumatology? I would think probably your GP would refer you to the allergy clinic, to an allergy specialist. You are likely to have quite a lot of allergy testing done before you see a mast cell specialist. And there aren't that many mast cell specialists, generally speaking. It's a really, really niche area. You may find reaching out to mast cell charities, they've got a better idea for that one. But generally I would say GP referral to allergy clinic, and then at the allergy clinic discuss that you don't think it is pure allergies, you actually think it's a global kind of mast cell issue. Yeah, hopefully that answers that one. My 7-year-old daughter just got diagnosed with hypermobility, and it's so hard to understand. She has muscle pain as well, but the doctor said this wouldn't be part of HMS. Is this true? In short, no. If your joints are wobbly and generally a bit naff, and you are on the verge of falling over or toppling out of your chair at any given moment, your muscles work overtime to keep you held together and functional. Muscle pain is one of the more common symptoms of hypermobility disorders because you're making your body work overtime all of the time. Equally, if you are falling over more often than not, if you're getting ligament injuries, if your posture is a bit naff, if your core strength isn't quite up to scratch, all of that will cause muscle pain. So basically the doctor doesn't know what they're talking about, and I would bypass them and go and see a physiotherapist and work on building muscle gradually and slowly and safely, and maybe get some helpful information on hypermobility disorders and forward it to your GP at a later date. But yeah, basically muscle pain is a pretty common one. It's probably more common than joint pain for some people. I think particularly in terms, so one of the major issues particularly for kids, but for all of us, is a delayed onset of pain. So it's really, really common to do an activity and think you've gotten away with it and you're feeling pretty good about it, and then the next day you wake up and feel like you've been run over by a bus. I think it's partly a proprioceptive issue and partly a kind of difficult processing issue for all of us, but yeah, it's really common to kind of overdo it a little bit and think you're okay and then wake up tomorrow and it's really tough. But particularly for youngsters, it's really difficult to teach that that's what's happening. So learning to pace properly and learning to take more regular breaks, learning to be posturally aware, learning to do things without hyperextending your joints is really, really important, because if you can pace yourself and you've got good posture and you're not overstretching yourself, the delayed onset pain tends to be not quite so bad. And the fatigue crashes afterwards tend to be not quite so bad. So yeah, pacing is a really kind of important starting point for that. But a lot of the self-management for hypermobility disorders, you don't require a GP for, particularly for kids, because medications, a lot of the ones that would be useful for symptoms that you may have, can't be prescribed anyway at a younger age. So things like pacing, like spatial awareness, physiotherapy, looking after our joints, that kind of thing, adapting school activities, handwriting, all of that stuff, you don't need a GP for. Get yourself an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist, even speak to the school, start talking around in groups, get some advice from the HMSA. Your GP doesn't sound like the best in terms of management strategies, so learn from other sources and then report back, and hopefully they'll kind of get the idea. But yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, scrolling down. Okay, it's interesting. I struggle with cooking. It's really difficult sometimes and really gets me down, as I'm only 25 years old and already struggling holding pots and pans and chopping veg. Cooking adaptations I love. So there are quite a lot of little gadgets and gizmos you can use for cooking that actually can make it a lot easier, but you can still get the activity done. So some of them actually, ads, can you just scamper into the kitchen and get like the fryer basket things, little mesh ones for the saucepan.
The big stick things.
Yeah, and a saucepan that matches. You can go out there with them. Sorry, I've sent my minion off to gather supplies to demonstrate with. So one of the things you can look at are adaptive knives. So you can get upright knives where the handle and the blade are at right angles. So when you're cutting, you haven't got to cut with your wrist twisted round, you cut with like a sawing motion. That twists your wrist a lot less and it puts a lot less pressure on your fingers, which makes it a lot easier to do without kind of injuring yourself too much. So, adaptive knives, food processors, so you can chop gadgets up, are really, really useful. Holding pots and pans, I'm just going to demonstrate in a second. Thank you all. Come on, saucepan. Okay. Not helpful. So one of the things you can do for saucepans are heavy, and actually heavy things containing boiling water are particularly dangerous. So you can get these little kind of fryer baskety things, like so, and you plonk these in your saucepan, and whatever you're cooking goes in the fryer basket. When you're done cooking it, simply lift the ingredients and the basket out, leave the boiling water for later. At the very least, if you've left it for later, you've got something heavy that doesn't contain boiling water. Best case scenario, leave it for later and make somebody else put it away. But yeah, it means you can get food out without having to risk boiling water and wrist injuries at the same time. So you can pick these up from most good cook shops, you can pick them up online quite easily, and they are life-changing in terms of getting stuff out of saucepans. Obviously doesn't work quite so well for things like sauce because of the holes, but generally you can do those with like a ladle or a spoon or something anyway, so something like this will hopefully make cooking a little bit easier. Okay, let me just put that down. Okay, all right, scrolling down, what do we got? Okay, another question here on wrists. So strengthening exercises for wrists. Ideally see a physiotherapist about this. One of the things you can start doing though is just pacing your activities more. So don't like do loads of stuff and then have a big rest, do a little bit, have a rest, do a little bit, have a rest. Even just really simple things like resting your arm on the kind of arm of a chair and just dropping your wrist down and back up again. Yeah, and simple things like that. At different angles can be quite a nice simple one. Do check with a physio or with your GP first. It's something like that you can then start adding in like a tin of beans as weights, and you can start building your way up. Tape can also be quite a useful one. In terms of wrist supports, there isn't like a generic product where I just go, ta-da, all bendy people need this. So you can drop me a message and we'll kind of do that in an appointment at some point, or see an orthotist about that one. Generally with splinting, I do recommend seeing an orthotist or a hand therapist on the NHS, simply because they can be quite expensive, but also because it can be quite difficult to get the right fit. If the NHS gets the fit wrong, they buy you something else. If you get the fit wrong, you've wasted your money and then you've got to buy something else yourself too. So generally speaking, orthotics is the way to go, but obviously COVID's made that a little bit difficult at the moment. So drop me a message and I'll see what I can do. Okay, scrolling down. Dropping stuff due to poor grip, pretty common, I'm afraid. You may find compression gloves help with that, especially compression gloves with like little grippy bubbles on them. Just to give you a little bit more kind of awareness as to what your body's actually up to. Okay, scrolling down. Do you know anyone who is a high-level functioning athlete, not just gymnast contortionist, that has managed to keep performing with EDS? Yes, I do. Quite a few, in fact. There is an EDS Athletes Facebook group. So I would recommend checking that one out, because there's all kinds of like adaptations and stuff for things like modifying grips for things like splinting, taping, coping with joints, learning techniques when your proprioception is rubbish, that kind of thing. EDS Athletes is the place to go for that one. In short, yeah, it is possible. One of the things I would say though is focus on like recovery skills. Learn how to manage injuries really, really, really well. Because regardless of how successful you are as an athlete, you're going to get injured. But if you basically acquire the skills of a physiotherapist, if you are prepared with strapping tapes and splints and ice, and don't be afraid to use mobility aids. Just because you need them after training does not mean you can't be an athlete. You can be an athlete, train really, really hard, and then maybe because the day after training tends to be not quite so great, use mobility aids then. It's totally okay to do so. Yeah, recovery stuff, being really, really proactive. Pacing is really, really important as well. So it is possible. Stay fit. Don't let yourself slack off, because it's much, much easier to maintain high level fitness than it is to lose it and get it back again. So yeah, I think that's probably my advice for that one. The EDS Athletes, check it out. Hopefully it is useful. Scrolling down again. Can you suggest safer ways to switch laundry from washer to dryer, or exercises to help muscles needed for that? I keep ending up with spasms in my back when I do laundry. Not fun. My first suggestion would be, can you do it sat down? Often the height of kind of washing machines and dryers is exactly high enough that you think you don't need to sit down to do it, and then try to stand up afterwards and realise you were wrong. So rolly office chairs, or like stools on wheels that like beauty therapists and stuff use, can be really, really useful in terms of just scooting around the kitchen at roughly dryer height in order to load stuff. Likewise, like baskets on wheels, that kind of thing, so you can just roll things between machines, is really useful. The other one is pacing. Do you need to take it all out and then put it all in at the same time? Is anything drastically awful going to happen to your laundry if you leave it for 5 minutes and go and have a stretch? So pacing can be a really, really important part of that. Physiotherapy, again, is not something I can advise on so much because I'm not a physiotherapist. So I would say self-referral to physio, mention that you're having difficulty with this particular thing. Spasms in particular, a lot of people have had success with magnesium for back spasms. So that might be worth investigating, just magnesium gels or sprays that you kind of rub into the affected area. It definitely made a big, big difference to me in terms of back spasms, and also cramps in my legs as well. But yeah, so I would say like just finding ways to sit down. One of the other ones that might be a bit out of the box but still quite useful, in like gardening shops and things, you can get like kind of kneeling pads but with like handles on the side, so you can lean on those and get you down to kneel on the padded bit and then use the handles to get back up again. I've actually recommended those in the past for people who are trying to wash their hair over the side of the bath. So it may be that having one of those in front of the machine means that you can get down to the floor quite easily, and then you'll be working at the right height and then get back up again afterwards. So that might be worth having a look into. Okay. Scrolling down some more. Ooh. Oh no, close the tab, what am I doing? Sorry, ignore me. Clicked on the wrong button. My daughter starts PT and OT therapy. I heard that this is very helpful. Can anyone give me advice, since this will be our first time? So, as an OT, I like to think I can advise on that. I've also done a whole heck of a lot of PT myself. So, first appointments, generally be open and honest. If you are the sort of person, like if she gets embarrassed or worries about things, write stuff down in advance. The more open and honest you are and the more information you share, the better they'll be able to help. So don't be afraid to go in there with like an itemised list of things that are difficult. It's totally okay to write notes in advance. It's totally okay to kind of keep a notebook with you for like 2 weeks leading up to the appointment, and just jot down stuff that pops into your head. Particularly with brain fog, it's really, really easy to forget things that you wanted to talk about. So my best piece of advice is to ask for the contact details of the people you meet with. And then if you do think of something at a later date, you can email them or you can phone them and just say, oh, I forgot to mention this, does that make a difference to the plan, or whatever. So keeping contact details is a good one, but generally speaking, honesty, notes, be prepared to be poked and prodded or quizzed a little bit, but it will vary so much depending on what service is, who the professional is, what you can get away with due to COVID, and you know what her challenges are. So basically just go in with an open mind and hope for the best, but notes and contact details are a useful one. But yeah, generally the first assessment tends to be a lot of like quizzing and chatting about things that are difficult or things that need improvement or problems or whatever, and then you'll make a plan together for what you're planning on doing to address those challenges later down the line, and then get yourself booked in for whatever the next one is. Okay. Lots of nice chat about ring splints and crunchy joints in the thing. Okay. thing hammering me at the moment is joint swelling, including my lower back and the bottom of my feet. Very painful. That doesn't sound fun. I checked that one with a GP actually, but you may find that getting your feet up and elevated is useful, and ice can be useful as well. So rest breaks. You may find compression clothing is useful for that as well. But elevation and ice are just the kind of best approach for swelling for that one. Okay. Ooh. How are you diagnosed? I've been told my joints are hypermobile and I've severe joint pain for almost 9 years now, which was diagnosed as fibromyalgia, but they now believe maybe something else. They just can't figure out what the something else is. If you are hypermobile and you have pain, generally speaking, it's a good indication that it's some kind of hypermobility disorder. Hypermobility spectrum disorders can be diagnosed by a GP. Generally speaking, kind of genetic connective tissue disorders, so if you're looking at like Marfan, Stickler's, the various EDSs, tend to be diagnosed by either a rheumatologist or a geneticist. But generally speaking, a good starting point would be to speak to your GP about hypermobility spectrum disorder. There are quite a lot of resources online on the HMSA website that are just information for healthcare practitioners. So that might be a useful thing to look at. But yeah, generally there are also some hypermobility clinics around the UK you can get referred to, but often GP is a starting point for HSDs and then rheumatologist for anything kind of above and beyond what your GP can cope with. But yeah, if you've got documented hypermobility already and they think fibromyalgia-ish but not actually fibro, I would not be surprised if you join the bendy crew very, very shortly. Okay. Is it common for people with hypermobility to fracture bones easier or pull ligaments? My daughter is 12 and got told she has mild hypermobility, but she's broken loads of bones and just wonder if it links. So, less so for hypermobility spectrum disorders and for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but easy fracturing is a characteristic for some of the other connective tissue disorders. So, osteogenesis imperfecta, there are a load of different kinds of that. I genuinely, how do I not remember this? Brain blank. I don't know how many different kinds. Anyway, osteogenesis imperfecta, commonly called brittle bone disease, is one of the hypermobility disorders. Symptoms include joint hypermobility, but it also includes quite a lot of fractures. So it may be that that's kind of the bendy spectrum you need to start looking at. Yeah, so the combination of ligament injuries and bone injuries is normally an osteogenesis imperfecta thing. Quite often for other hypermobility disorders, you tend to break bones slightly less often, if anything. I don't think I've ever broken a bone. I've had a couple of injuries where doctors told me that if I wasn't hypermobile, I would have broken something, because it's kind of like having built-in crumple zones. So when I've fallen off stuff, ligaments have gone and my bones have been saved. But yeah, so osteogenesis imperfecta is what I would start looking at for that one. May not be the case, not a doctor, can't diagnose, particularly not via live stream, but it would be interesting reading for you, I think. Okay. What is a hand therapist? I'm being referred to one, but with brain fog, I forgot to ask exactly what it is. So hand therapy is a kind of specialist branch of occupational therapy where they basically just look at hands. A lot of what they do is providing hand exercises, strengthening exercises, splinting, looking at like grip strength and range of motion, fine motor control, dexterity, that kind of stuff. But it's basically just any kind of difficulties from the wrist up, hand therapist is the specialist you want to see. So yeah, hopefully that answers that one. Really, the different causes of clicking joints. I have issues in my left hip, which I'm fairly sure is the tendon option. I can almost feel the tendon catch on my hip joint, but is it connected to hypermobility? They MRI'd it and said it was fine and didn't look hypermobile. Not quite sure what hypermobile looks like, but okay. But when I do the butterfly pose in Pilates and yoga, my left knee hits the floor. Oh, not right. which implies it moves further on one side than the other one. Physio has helped in that it's not an everyday pain anymore, but it's still triggered by certain movements, mostly bringing my knee up towards my chest and down again. And I just wondered if you have any thoughts. Okay, so there's a condition sometimes called dancer's hip, or snapping, I think snapping hip, what's it called?
Snapping hip syndrome, I think.
Yeah, snapping hip syndrome, which I will now demonstrate for you because I have it myself. So, what you can sometimes get is, so the hip joint has like a sticky out ball bit on the side called the greater trochanter. You can get your tendons from your muscles in your leg catch over that joint and kind of snap backwards and forwards. It is literally just the tendon snapping from one side to the other. You can have that in combination with hypermobility. So an MRI scan is normally done when you're laying still, meaning that they can't actually see your range of motion, meaning that you can't tell if somebody's hypermobile or not from an MRI. If you have an increased range of motion in your hip, it is hypermobile. That's literally what it means. So you do have a hypermobile hip, but you may also have a snapping hip issue. That one actually weirdly is often fixed by stretching. So what tends to happen is that you need strengthening exercises for the hypermobility and stretching exercises for the snapping hip. There is quite a lot of information online about that one. What you may find useful for all of the hip issues is compression. So a good pair of Spanx or shorts, like compression shorts for sport, will provide a little bit of support, a little bit of postural awareness, and may help you kind of improve your ability to keep your hip where it belongs while doing everyday activities. So yeah, hopefully that sort of is useful. But it definitely sounds like you've got a combination hypermobility and snapping hip issue, which is where I was sort of 10 years ago. That's exactly the issue that I had, where one hip was really, really bendy, but the tendons were kind of too tight, almost to compensate. So unstable that my muscles were like, oh no, don't fall out anymore. So I needed to get those to relax, but to actually increase my muscle tone so that it stayed where it belonged. So I would speak to physio about that one and just take a little bit of information in about the snapping hip thing. They may be able to provide some exercises to combat that as well. Okay. Scrolling down. Lots of people chatting about aids and adaptations and gadgets for the kitchen. I've got a giant list. I literally do personal shopping for disability stuff as part of my job. So do get in touch if you have a specific task that you cannot find a gadget for, because I guarantee I found one. Or there isn't one at this point yet. And do feel free to share gadgets that you absolutely love that are really useful, because often they help a lot of people as well. Okay. Scrolling down. Really struggle with grating. Why the heck can't I find an electric one? You can. Food processors with the little fit-in cone things often have a grating option, so I can grate carrot with a food processor. And it's changed my life. It's brilliant. But yeah, so it's like food processors that do multiple things. So chop, grate, slice. Sometimes there's a grating option that you can use to actually grate stuff. Okay, scrolling down some more. Oh my goodness, it's 8 o'clock already. Let's just cram one more in. What have we got? What can friends do to be understanding or supportive without being patronising? Often the easiest thing you can get people to learn is that because you have a variable condition, what you need and what you have to do is going to be variable. Get people to ask. Don't ask, don't know. And actually, in terms of friendship groups and things, often the things that really help me are having pyjama parties rather than dinner parties. we will have low impact, home-based, relaxing activities. Rather than going out and doing fancy things that require me to be in grown-up mode. I will just stay home in fuzzy pyjamas and we'll order pizza and we'll watch films together. Yeah, it's get people to ask. You are still you. You fell into a friendship for some reason. It's just that you're you but with back pain, or you're you but with a slightly reduced capacity to run long distances. The other thing that might be worth looking into is Stickman Communications by Hannah Ensor. Has some really, really amazing resources for communicating hypermobility, but in a kind of light-hearted and fun way. And I would definitely recommend checking them out because they're brilliant. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that one. In terms of teaching people what it's like, it's much easier to do it if you're laughing at the same time. So yeah, hopefully this has been a useful session for everyone. I am going to write down all of the questions that I didn't get through because we had quite a lot tonight, and I will answer them at the start of next month's session. So do tune in third Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. If you have questions but you don't want to ask them publicly, you can message me or the HMSA and I'll just read them out at the start of the session. So yeah, hopefully that was useful and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.